They were the kind of couple everyone admired. George and Elizabeth Harper, married for 70 years, living in a quiet corner of Savannah, Georgia. He called her his angel, the woman who saved his life, and gave it meaning. But what George discovered just 3 days before Elizabeth's death shattered everything he thought he knew. A dusty letter hidden inside an old sewing box, a name that didn't belong to her, and a secret that had eluded even the FBI for over 6 decades. Elizabeth wasn't who she said she was, and what she confessed on her deathbed would unravel a crime so dark, so buried, it had become legend. A woman he loved, or a woman who ran from her past. What would you do if the person lying next to you for a lifetime had been hiding from the law? Hit like, subscribe and let's go. For decades, George Harper lived what many would call a blessed life. Every morning, he rose before the sun in their weathered Savannah home, brewed strong coffee in the same chipped pot, and listened to the soft creak of wood beneath his feet as he moved through the house they'd built with love and time. Elizabeth would join him by the window, always in her robe, always with that quiet smile. They had a rhythm: gardening, church on Sundays, bridge nights with the same 2 couples for over 30 years. Their neighbors adored them. Their children had moved away, but the phone rang every weekend. There were no scandals, no secrets, or so George believed. But looking back now, he remembers the one room she always kept locked. The one drawer she never let him touch. At the time, it felt like nothing. But nothing was about to become everything. It happened on a Tuesday. Elizabeth had fallen ill, nothing serious, just a dizzy spell, or so she claimed. But when George went to fetch her sweater from the hallway cabinet, the key wasn't where it always was. He searched calmly at first, then with rising urgency. When he finally opened the drawer she'd always guarded, he didn't find knitting yarn or birthday cards. Instead, there was an old photograph, grainy, black and white, with a man's face violently scratched out. Folded beneath it, a yellowed letter addressed to someone named Rose. Elizabeth had no sisters. No close friends by that name. George stared at the items, his chest tightening with confusion, and something else, a flicker of fear. When he confronted her, she smiled too quickly and changed the subject. But from that moment on, he couldn't stop watching. And he'd never feel peace again. In the days that followed, George couldn't shake the image of that scratched-out face. Elizabeth acted as though nothing had changed, humming as she watered the azaleas, folding linens with perfect precision, but now George noticed things he'd never paid attention to. Each morning, before he woke, she would disappear into the attic for exactly 17 minutes. He timed her. No one had been up there in decades. When he asked why, she laughed lightly and said, "Oh, just chasing memories." But that night, when he climbed the creaky stairs after she'd gone to sleep, he found dust disturbed, an old suitcase unlatched, and inside, a passport with her face, but a different name. Margaret and Lowell. He stood there, frozen, heart pounding, the wooden floor moaning beneath him. Was his Elizabeth someone else entirely? And if so, who had he really married? The next morning, George waited for Elizabeth to leave for her usual walk and then, with trembling hands, retrieved the passport from the attic. The name, Margaret and Lowell, echoed in his mind like a bell tolling in an empty church. Curious and unsettled, he visited the county archive, a place he'd never stepped into in his life. The clerk behind the counter looked puzzled when he showed the name. "You sure?" she asked. There was a Margaret and Lowell, wanted for questioning in a 1951 robbery in Georgia. Vanished without a trace. George's knees went weak. A robbery? A fugitive? His Elizabeth, the woman who sang lullabies to birds, was a wanted woman. He staggered back to his car, head spinning. As he turned the key in the ignition, a folder on the passenger seat caught his eye. It wasn't there before. Inside, were news clippings. Yellowed. faded. Each one circled. And every photo showed the same woman. Elizabeth. Or was it Margaret? George couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his old recliner, the house silent but for the faint ticking of the clock that suddenly felt too loud. On the coffee table lay the folder, a time capsule of betrayal. The headlines screamed louder than any voice: local bank robbed, employee disappears. FBI searches for suspect Margaret Lowell. The dates matched. The woman's face, though younger, was unmistakable. It was her. It was Elizabeth. The woman he kissed every morning, the one who made his tea just right, had built her life on a lie. A criminal lie. George's chest tightened, fear, betrayal, love, and disbelief tangled into something unrecognizable. What else had she hidden? Was their entire life a performance? Or, was there something she was running from? He felt cold, small, like a man realizing he'd shared a home, a bed, a life, with a stranger. And tomorrow, he needed answers. The next morning, George did what he never imagined: he opened the drawer where Elizabeth kept her old journals. He'd never snooped before. But now, trust was shattered. Between the pages, he found a small metal key taped to the inside cover. A note written in shaky cursive read, "In case it ever catches up with me." George followed the key to a safety deposit box at a bank downtown, the same bank she once worked at before they met. Inside, a stack of sealed letters, photos, and a revolver. His hands trembled. The letters detailed years on the run, aliases, safe houses, and one name that kept appearing: Vincent Russo, the man who led the heist and vanished. "If you're reading this," one note began, "he's found me." George's stomach dropped. Was Vincent still out there? Was Elizabeth in hiding all these years, or still in danger? His safe, peaceful world had just become a battlefield, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to fight. 2 days later, under gray skies and a thin drizzle, George stood beside Elizabeth's grave, her name now etched in stone. Friends and family murmured soft condolences, but his mind was a storm of betrayal and grief. How could she hide a life like that for 70 years? As the ceremony ended and people drifted away, a man remained. Late 70s, lean, with sunken eyes and a limp. He approached George slowly. "She told you, didn't she?" he asked. "She always feared I'd come before she could." George froze. "Vincent?" The man nodded. "She took the fall for something I did. Disappeared to protect me." George's breath caught. This wasn't just betrayal, it was sacrifice. All those decades, Elizabeth had lived in fear, for him. Before George could speak, the man handed him a worn envelope. "She left this for you. Said you'd only understand if I gave it to you myself." George clutched it, heart racing. Maybe, this wasn't the end. George sat alone in the dim kitchen, the old envelope trembling in his hands. The room still smelled faintly of Elizabeth's perfume, and the silence pressed heavily. Inside, a faded photo of her, young, fierce, in a courtroom, and a letter. "My darling George," it began. "I lied to protect someone who didn't deserve it. I testified falsely in 1951. Not for Vincent, but for his wife, my sister. She killed a man in self-defense. I disappeared to give her a second chance. And when I met you, I couldn't bear to lose that chance myself." George felt tears rising, but they were no longer of pain, they were of understanding. She hadn't been a criminal. She had been loyal. Selfless. He folded the letter carefully, kissed the photo, and whispered, "I forgive you, Lizzie." The weight of decades lifted, and for the first time in days, he exhaled with peace. A week after Elizabeth's funeral, George sat on their old front porch in Asheville, North Carolina, the same porch they built together in 1962. The wind carried a softness that reminded him of her laugh. The world hadn't changed, but he had. He no longer saw their love as perfect. He saw it as human, flawed, messy, but real. And somehow, that made it even more precious. Every evening, he still turned on the porch light, like she used to. Not to guide her home, but to remember that truth always finds its way through the dark. So here's the question for you. If someone you loved did something terrible, would you still love them the same? Let us know in the comments below. Hit like if this story touched something in you. Subscribe for more real, powerful stories that stay with you, long after the video ends. Until next time, keep your eyes open.